What inspired you to create such fluid forms in your textile pieces?
I was actually just writing about this yesterday because I was applying for something. I think for me, the first comes first comes a question or something that I want to research, and not so much right away like a vision of what form the work will take. Um, So a lot of my work is inspired by observation of nature or natural phenomenon, and also by observation of mine or other humans' emotional and sometimes even physical reactions to it. Like this idea of like nature as a sublime, how we feel awe by looking at the ocean, or we feel calm, or when we, looking at mountains, we feel peace, or, that. So where does that come from, and just the physicality of it too. And I think the research of that, and especially the research of some natural phenomena, also sometimes takes me to, I don't know, look into the physics of something or the chemistry of something. There's like a project I did a while ago that I was just like thinking a lot about like waves, and I read somewhere that the water particles actually don't move; they just go up and down, but it creates the wave. And I kept thinking about that. I was like, this idea of like, oh, the mass doesn't move, but it does create some movement. And then because I work with textiles and that's my medium of research, that is also the tool that then I use to think. So when I have that question, when I have that like inquiry, then through play and experimentations with the tools that I know, like weaving or dyeing or printing, then forms start to generate. So I think the fluid organic forms maybe manifest because it is a fluid organic process, but also because a lot of the things that I'm interested in exploring and research are fluid and sometimes not so tangible per se too, like a wave or the wind or the interference of light in a water surface, things like that.
And do you think that because of the way that you look at the natural world like that, do you think that that influenced using natural dyes as a part of your practice, or like how did that come into play?
Yeah, I think so. I think that came into play through different ways. I started working with natural dyes when I was in college, and I was studying textile conservation. And that was the first time I was introduced to this idea of natural color, which it's interesting to me because I feel like now when I teach it, one of the things that I teach, or one of the bridge that I try to make, is how we have all interacted with natural color already, like through making a tea or brewing a coffee, etc. But to me, it was the same thing. I honestly had not think about it ever. And I had done experiments. I learned pH in middle school through the dye changes in dry cabbage. So I had been exposed to it. I just hadn't considered it like as color that I could use and that others had used until then. And then it was quite, like an explosion for me, because I think it was something that felt really at the intersection of a lot of things that I was already like interested in terms of like materiality and provenance and botany and in a little bit of like magic too. I think I was pretty bummed with conservation school at the time, and like the rigor and like the science of it all. And I think it was really like an opening for like the inconsistent, the hard to harness. Even if everything can be explained through like a chemistry like perspective, that there is so much room for the unexpected, and I love that. And I think that was the beginning of me finding that like intersection in between some of the things that I was interested, which I don't think it had made sense until, and I was like, oh yes, like it is all connected. I think I had been until then very much so in us and nature, not us as
Right.
nature
Mhm.
perspective. And then, yeah, like out of school, it was when I started practicing as a natural dyer and really learning, um, the all through experience, because that's really the only way to learn like the magic and the science, and now magic is science, and but also tapping into the growing, so how these plants exist into their natural setting, how these plants exist in their domesticated setting too. Soon after college, when I moved to New York, I started a project called Sowing Seeds, that attempted to grow and identify natural dying plants and kind of have these conversations. How some of these plants are already growing everywhere, we're just not noticing them or identifying them for their potential for color. Others that dyers love to use are not from here at all. And in order for us to have them, we either have to grow them, so introduce also these foreign species, or like buy them from like elsewhere. But the growing the dye plants also like brought like another layer that I didn't have, which is again like that, yeah, these aren't materials, these are like living beings.
Yeah.
And that, the dyes exist in these plants, or they are produced by the plants, like to fulfill like other biological functions other than our entertainment, or rather than like provide like a scholar. And I thought it was also like a lot like on that nuance that really, yeah, there's something very sacred in harvesting like the plants too, for like to get the color, or they can be, or they can also be something very transactional, when I'm just like using the plants, materials to get color, in the same way that like I use some plants to like get fed or to get clothes or to etc. But a material that I like to work with for its complexity and for the questions that asks me. I think because it is complex to me, I don't exclusively work with natural dyes for color. I think when I use natural dyes in my work, I often ask the question, why natural dyes? Why do I need to work with natural dyes for this project? And sometimes the answer is aesthetic, is because I want that complexity, I want that nuance. Other times it's conceptual, like there's something that dye is bringing, either because there's something about the way I got access to it, or because of the connection that I have with that particular like material, or like the connections that exist like in the past. And other times it just doesn't make sense. And what I'm trying to get out of that work is not, validated or brought up by the use of natural dyes, and then I don't.
Do you remember the first time that you grew something from a seed? Like, speaking of like growing your own.
The first time. I'm sure like I grew stuff. Actually, no, I think, this is maybe my first memory. I don't think it was the first time, but around Christmas time, there's a Portuguese tradition that, so when you do the nativity scenes, all of that, and you also grow, like wheat berries, like you germinate them to create these grasses. We call them searas. And I love doing that with my grandmothers and my great aunts. And they did it all their life too, which is something that I think that is, I think, a first experience of growing something. I remember we would put the seeds like in just like this wet paper, and they germinate really fast. And there's something also like magical about these like plants that can grow without soil. But yeah, I think that's the first experience.
What do you think that you've learned about flowers from growing them?
Well, that they're just a part of this plant.
Yeah.
I feel like more recently I learned more about fungi and like fungi world, and I feel like now someone needs to like stop me whenever like I'm like on a hike and I'm like, look at the mycelium, and like, do you know that the mushrooms are just the fruiting bodies? So yeah, I'm like full of myself right now, and that, but it's like it's new to me. But I think with same thing for flowers. I think through growing, I think you also get that understanding that, a flower is part of like a complex like system and a complex being. Be similar to just like, oh, we just our head. Or it is, I think, sometimes like maybe a little bit unfair for the plant structure, because they're the ones that like we focus more on because of the beauty, and that is exactly by design. That is a lot of times the function of the flower is to attract and to mesmerize and to make it noticeable. Yeah, I think it also is pretty cool that flowers are the best or one of the easiest way to identify a plant too. I've been learning a lot about that through my mom. She also got really into botany recently, and she's very disciplined in the ways that she taught herself. But going on hikes with her, she's always trying to identify the plants, and she gets very bummed when they're not in flower yet or not in bloom. Because like, I wish I could tell what it is, but these two species are very similar. I think that just the understanding of what is the flower in the grand context, and what also means for the plant to thrive like as a whole, based on what we see and what we care for.
So do you think that from growing or from witnessing things grow, you've learned anything about yourself?
I think what I was saying earlier, I think I've learned that we are conditioned through our education and through how we live, and our society, which we created, right, is a reflection of us too, to see nature as other, or we as other from nature too, and that leads to overlooking, not paying attention, dismissing, labeling, all these behaviors that we do with each other too, other humans, but we definitely like replicate them like in the ways that we exist, like with the rest of ecosystems. And I think if I didn't have that more like direct experience, like with growing plants or like working with plants, I don't think I would have gotten so much awareness to the extent that we do that. I think there's something really humbling on trying to facilitate the growth of something. I think that is true for anything. And the plants are just like one. There's like a lot of variables, and I think also like the humbling that there's also like limits to your intervention. I think is also very true to humans, that we like to think that we have a lot of control, that we have like a lot of like agency in determining the outcome of things. But most times we like mess up more than we help. And I think when growing plants, that is also the truth. There's so much we don't understand, and then so much we try to condition so that it makes more sense for us, but it doesn't necessarily make more sense for the plants.
You mentioned you're familiar with authors such as Stefano Mancuso, Donna Haraway, and Zoe Schlanger. How do you perceive the natural world after reading their perspectives? Did it shift how you live your day-to-day life?
I don't think it shifted how I live my day-to-day life. Maybe not yet. I mean, I think like all those authors like offer like perspectives in how we interact with nature that are, they resonated a lot with how I've been thinking, or I'm interested in learning more. Like, I mean, Donna Haraway has been writing about this for a really long time, and Stefano Mancuso too. But a lot of the things that they like bring up is this idea of like plant intelligence or plant agency. So which to me kind of resumes back, even if we like remove the plant part, just us considering that other beings and other like living systems can have perceptions and agency in the same way that we do, but that cannot be compared because it's totally different from us. And so I think I learned a lot through their perspectives and how they try to decenter human perspective from the conversation, which I think maybe it is the part that has resonated the most with, I guess, changes in my day-to-day life. Like, we can also try to decenter us while engaging with other humans, with other people. And oftentimes that leads to more empathy and more compassion and just better relations all in all. So I think there is a lot to learn from how, we can better just how we move through the world and how we situate, not from a place of labeling and categorizing and trying to like understand through like imposing a known system, but trying to respect and see and really notice what everyone, and by everyone I mean humans and non-humans, like is trying to do and their role in this in this great ecosystem. I think that is kind of the goal, for me at least. But obviously, like, it also like it doesn't really like get to that. We also conditioned to like think of other beings as different. With plants, it's tricky because I think so much of it is the way we also like interact with them. Like, we've been talking about like growing plants, right? Like plants need humans to grow them. Yeah. They don't. Plants only need humans to grow them when we need them for something. So, and I think that is true with everything. It's like nature doesn't need us. We are nature. We don't need, I think it all like exists like and is integrated like on its own. But whenever we humans and our systems and our needs become dependent on something, then it needs intervention. And I think that intervention and that control and that cultivation, domestication, which, I don't know enough to like criticize it or not, but has allowed us to like exist here, in for good or for worse. Or maybe we would have made it anyway. I don't know. But yeah, there's necessarily putting things like in different hierarchies through that. If I'm growing a plant to use as natural dye, I'm necessarily not respecting the agency of that plant to exist like in its preferred ecosystem and to fulfill its life cycle, which it is to go through seed and start again, because I'm harvesting it when I wanted to use it for what I wanted, because I grew it for what I wanted.
The next thing that I wanted to talk about was sowing seeds, but since you mentioned it, I would also invite you to talk about maybe the class that you're teaching now, and I wanted to know if maybe you somehow incorporate these themes into your teaching.
Yeah, I think I incorporate everything that I'm thinking about in my teaching, and I definitely also strive to incorporate everything the students are thinking about, like in a teaching. I think, I'm not teaching natural dyeing is not teaching something that exists as either like proprietary or like rigid knowledge. Like it is something like as an activity that people have done for thousands and thousands of years. Like, we have harnessed these colors out of these materials with so many different approaches, so many different techniques, so much indigenous knowledge that we like building still like on top. So if anything, when I'm teaching natural dyeing, I'm just opening up a conversation, like trying to like transfer like some type of knowledge or experience that I have to start someone else's journey. But I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about like make its way like in the way that I teach, because some really like explain the behavior of the plants in the context of natural dyes. So the fact that the materials are very much alive and they're conditioned like by by, like the external factors or like our ecosystems, like in the soil that they're growing, the amount of sun that they got, like the amount of water, stress factors, all of that will have a direct like influence on the amount of dyes that the plants will grow, and even like what type of dyes, because they're all like part of how the plant lives. So understanding that and not expecting that not expecting, I guess, that I'm spacing out on a word, but like that ability to like replicate results like in the same way that you can with the synthetic dye. Synthetic dye is always the same. It's synthesized in a lab to be exactly the same. I read that actually was on Zoe Schlatter's like book, but this idea, which I thought it was like so fascinating, that like a plant structure is like as sophisticated as the best chemistry lab in the world, and it can synthesize like any component, just like, in minutes reaction, which I think it's so incredible. But I think that in itself, it's like, there's agency there. So yeah, we're not getting always the same thing. So I think understanding that allows, I think, natural dyers to have a more like generous approach with the natural dye plant. So instead of expecting like standard results, like you should expect and welcome the variations and the magic. And I think definitely conversations that to me, like, I think became more important through growing, but also I think through getting more educated, really, I guess in questioning like ideas of the Anthropocene or like human excellence or superiority, which I think have to do is like, like our right to use these plants and for what, and is it necessary, and even ideas of like provenance to like the disconnect sometimes that we can experience when working with natural dyes, but not really seeing the materials as materials that were once alive and thriving and doing their own thing. So those are all things that I try to bring into class, not from a perspective of preaching, but really just like raising the questions. And I think different things resonate with different artists and different students and their different practices too. But yeah, I think that's the power of taking a class, is that you get questioned, and then you like, find your answers or find your own questions too, and then you run with them.
I mentioned through this project that I am focusing on like this loss of connection that a lot of people have. And what do you think is something that can rekindle people's connection to the natural world? And do you think that this is possible, or?
I think it's possible. I think more than possible. I think it will be necessary. I think we'll not have like any other option. I think just really seeing, noticing, listening, being present. And I think when really seeing, really listening, without the expectations of like, oh, we already know what we're going to see. I don't, I think regardless, like we will continue to like have and want color. We always wanted, we'll continue to like need to be fed and to be dressed and all of that. So for me, there's no such scenario. And it's like, oh, like we all coexist and like we don't impact like each other, like in different ways, like, like all the different living systems, like we have been impacting each other like since day one. That's also the beauty of nature too. But I think finding whatever is that balance and being thoughtful on keeping that balance, not taking more than what we need. Currently we take much more than what we need. So I don't know, I think just maybe to start, I think you suggested, no, you didn't suggest, but you asked me about it, but to start, just plant a seed, watch it grow. Witness the magic and see if that resonate deeper with you?
Mhm.